welcome to everyone who's joining, and we're going to go ahead and get started. So, like I said, hello and welcome to today's webinar. Thanks so much for joining me this morning to talk about Florida's dry season. So my name is Jackie Leibowitz, and I'm the Water Resources Program Assistant at UF IFAS Extension, Sarasota County. So today I'm going to be sharing some tips on how you can get through Florida's dry season, which is officially underway, as most of you know. But for today's plan, we're going to start off with a brief overview of Florida's dry season, mainly when it occurs and what we can expect in terms of precipitation. Then we're going to talk about why it's so important to watch the weather and wait to water. And then we're going to talk about how you can increase the health of your plants and your general landscape by skipping a week or two of irrigation during this cooler weather. And then I'm going to talk about rain sensors, rain gauges, and rain barrels. And at the end, I'll close off the presentation with a couple other dry season tips and resources. So let's talk about Florida's dry season. Some of you got this correct in the poll. So Florida's dry season occurs from October 1st to May 31st. So it's the time outside of our rainy season. And here you can see last year's average rainfall throughout each month. So February last year, we received just over an inch of rain, but on average, we got just over about 2.5 inches of precipitation as a monthly average throughout our entire dry season. And again, this is just looking at last year's precipitation data. So here's another interesting chart that estimates the number of days we get rain during the dry season. So again, this is based on last year's data, but it looks like we got about 8 to 9 days of rain from November to March, and then that number increases leading up to June. So that's the official start of our rainy season here in Florida. So what does this all mean? Well, to put it frankly, even when it's dry season, we're still going to get days where it rains. So it's really important to be in tune with when it rains to help not only save water, but to keep your plants healthy. So the basic rule of thumb is that you want to watch the weather and don't water if it's rained in the past 24 hours or if there's going to be rain in the next 24 hours. So the Sarasota County Water Atlas, which we're going to check out in just a minute, is a great resource for checking the latest rainfall data. And chances are, if you're tuning in from somewhere else, there may be a similar application to help you check your weekly rainfall. So if you have a automatic irrigation system, your rain sensor is going to help you make sure that you're not watering after a rain. But it's really important that you temporarily switch off your system if rain is on the way. And like I said, there's a number of apps to help you check what the forecast is. So on that note, your established landscape plants, which are plants that have settled into your landscape, are not going to need a whole lot of supplemental watering. And if they do, it's likely going to be in these coming months. And that said, you can switch to more efficient means of watering your landscape plants than sprinkler irrigation. And we'll get a little bit more into that later on in the presentation. So when it comes to turning off one of your programs, every system is different, but there are a couple rules that apply to most basic irrigation controllers. So generally speaking, all you have to do is turn your knob to the zone that you want to turn off and then put in 0 minutes for the runtime. And if you just want to turn your system off altogether, at least temporarily, it's usually just as simple as switching your controller to off in most cases. So this is the website for the Sarasota County Water Atlas, and this is their rainfall map. And it's a tool from the University of South Florida, and it's extremely handy for figuring out when to turn your irrigation system off this dry season. So you can check daily, weekly, and monthly precipitation data, which is all displayed in inches, which is very handy because the University of Florida recommends 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch of irrigation or rain per week. So for instance, this is the estimated rainfall from the last 7 days. So we didn't get a whole lot of rain, but it's important to check out this number periodically to see if you can run your system for a bit shorter or if you need to turn off your system altogether. So beyond making sure plants are getting just what they need, finding ways to conserve water through irrigation is crucial in meeting future water demands. So our state in general is looking at a potential 400 million gallon per day shortage by 2035. So we need to do what we can to save water in the present. It's also really important to consider the strain that our dry season puts on our water treatment facilities. So while they do have the capacity to treat and distribute a lot of water, right, the demand is going to be highest for irrigation during the dry season. So it's important that we all do our part to help conserve during particularly dry conditions so we can help reduce this strain. So just a quick reminder to follow your local water restrictions. These are a great guideline to follow when it comes to watering your turf, and not everybody is aware of them. So for instance, residents of unincorporated Sarasota County, and I know we have a few people from Sarasota County tuning in today, can only water once per week on their designated watering day, which is either going to be Tuesday or Thursday, depending on the last number in their home address. So addresses ending in an even number water on Tuesday, and addresses ending in an odd number have to water on Thursday. But regardless of which day you're watering, you can't turn your sprinklers on from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. And again, these are rules for people in unincorporated Sarasota County. Water restrictions are going to change depending on what municipality you're in. And if you're in another county altogether, they may look very different. So it's pretty easy to find your water restrictions. You just look up the city or the county that you're in and water restrictions, and something should pop up pretty easily online. So even in Sarasota County, this rule applies mainly to sprinkler irrigation. So in our county, micro irrigation and hand watering are not subject to time restrictions, which is pretty cool. So if you do install a micro irrigation system, you're not going to have to worry about what time or what day you water your plants. So again, we'll get a little bit more into micro irrigation later. And we actually have a class coming up later this month if you want to learn how to install your own system. But let's go ahead and for now talk a little bit more about the dangers of overwatering, which you can certainly still do during the dry season. So overwatering basically means using more water than is needed for your plants to grow and thrive. So of course, first and foremost, you're wasting potable water, which is limited due to the low recharge rate in our underground aquifers. Also, just another reminder, if you could please mute your microphones for the time being. We'll get to questions in a little bit. So when you apply too much water to the landscape, it's going to be retained in the soil until it can be absorbed either by the plant or lost to the atmosphere through evaporation. So when you have warm, wet soil, you risk the chance of unwanted bacteria, fungi, and pests entering that space and interacting with your plants and potentially damaging their roots. So you're not only exposing your plants to disease, but you're also discouraging healthy root growth when you overwater. So your turf naturally has shorter roots than other landscape plants already, which you can see here in this diagram. They're very short compared to trees and shrubs and other plants. So when you withhold water, you actually encourage those roots to grow deeper into the soil to access the water that's there. So with too much water, your plants are going to be weaker, and they're going to become needier with more irrigation applications. They're going to need more water more frequently because of those shorter roots, and they're going to need more mowing because of the increased growth due to overwatering. So beyond the harm that it can cause your plants, overwatering also has the potential to leach nutrients out of the soil and carry those nutrients into the water column where they're going to be wasted and potentially a pollutant. And not only that, but they can also run off into local water bodies and potentially contaminate those water bodies with fertilizer or those nutrients that I mentioned in the soil already. So this could lead to a potential imbalance in these freshwater ecosystems, and we don't want that. So it's important to be very aware of how much water you're applying to your landscape, and even more so if you're using reclaimed water, because that has some extra nutrients in it as well. So the lucky thing is, Even though it seems like we have to be really stingy with our water use over the dry season, this cooler weather that we're having is actually giving us a major advantage. So in the winter, plants need less water than they do in the summer. So that's because the evapotranspiration rates are a lot lower in cooler weather because you don't have that hot summer sun. So since plants need less water in the winter, it's actually a really good time to encourage healthy root growth. So when you irrigate your yard, that water doesn't get immediately used. Instead, like I said, it can trickle down through the soil and enter the plant's root zone, or that space in the soil where roots are present. So essentially, when you're withholding that water, the roots are going to grow deeper so it can access the water that's there. And so that leads to healthy root growth and longer grass roots. So the best part about all this is that not only are you helping encourage healthy root growth, but you get to do less work and use less water to make that happen. So the process is pretty simple. Research from the University of Florida suggests that turfgrass only needs 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch of water every 10 to 14 days in the winter months. And additionally, a lot of your Florida native plants and naturalized plants can withstand the drier weather already, and they're not going to need a lot of supplemental watering throughout most of the year. So that means that you can skip a week or even 2 or more of irrigation in the winter, and that's going to help cut down on your water consumption and help your plants be more resilient. So if you're worried that your turf isn't getting enough water, you can look for these visual signs of drought stress to help you determine whether to turn on your system. So the first thing you want to do is look for folded grass blades. So a small patch here or there doesn't mean a whole lot on its own, but if you have at least 1/3 of your landscape with folded blades, that could be a sign that your turf isn't getting what it needs. Second, your grass appears blue-gray instead of its usual vibrant green. And finally, and this is probably the most obvious indicator, when you walk on your turf grass, it doesn't spring back immediately after you walk on it. And so this is going to leave footsteps that last for several minutes. And when you see that happen, it means that it's definitely time to water your lawn. So all of this is to say, isn't to say that you should wait until your turf looks like this before you water. It's just more of an assurance that your grass is probably going to be fine if you hold off on watering on weeks with significant rainfall, or if you decide to skip a week of irrigation this winter. And of course, if for some reason that isn't enough, you'll be able to tell with these visual signs of drought stress. So let's now talk about making sure that your rain sensors are working, and that way you don't have to even bother turning off your system after every storm. You can let your tech do the work for you. So if you have an automatic irrigation system in the state of Florida, this is important, a lot of people don't know this, you are required to have a rain shutoff device. So this is any device that's going to respond to rainfall and shut off your system temporarily until conditions become dry again. So specifically, the statute reads that anyone with an automatic system has to properly install, maintain, and operate technology that inhibits or interrupts operation of the system during periods of sufficient moisture. So this technology usually includes rain sensors, but even smart irrigation controllers like soil moisture sensors are included and do the job. But most residents that do have an irrigation system have that rain sensor, since it's usually the cheapest option. So it's really important that you regularly check your rain sensor, because these things do have a tendency to wear down over time. And there are several kinds of rain sensors that exist on the market. But for the sake of brevity, I'm going to briefly walk you through how to test and maintain a cork disc sensor, which is one of the more efficient and popular types available. So here's how you can test your rain sensor to make sure it's working. So first, you want to run one of your irrigation zones, preferably one that's in your field of vision, and then go ahead and point a hose at your sensor and spray for a short amount of time. Usually just a few minutes is enough to do the trick. And if the device is working correctly, the irrigation zone should shut off. And so you should be able to hear that zone shutting off and see the sprinklers stop working. And if the system is running, even despite you applying all that water to your sensor, that means it's probably going to need to be repaired or even replaced. So we do free irrigation evaluations for Sarasota County residents. And a lot of the time when we visit homes, we find that people do not have working rain sensors. So you might take for granted that you have one with your irrigation system and you might think that it's working, but chances are it's not. So it's really important that you check it regularly. And I recommend doing this maybe once a year or twice a year and make sure that it's functional. And the other thing you want to make sure is that each of your irrigation zones has to be calibrated with your rain sensor. So before you decide to invest in a new sensor, if you find out that yours isn't working after testing it out, here are some tips. So the first thing you want to do is clean your sensor if it looks dirty or obstructed. So it might need to have the corks replaced if it's a cork disc sensor, and those are easy enough to buy online. If there are trees or structures blocking rain from reaching your device, you might have to move it to a new, more open area. Another thing that could go wrong is that the battery might be kaput, so you'll have to go ahead and check to see if you need a replacement. One other thing that could go wrong is that your wiring could be a little loose, so go ahead and open up your controller to see if that's the case. And most sensors attach to this little port right here labeled Sense. Otherwise, go ahead and do a check on your receiver box. If you have a wireless rain sensor, there could be something that's turned off or that needs some maintenance there. And if your cork disc rain sensor isn't working for you, if you don't like having to do that maintenance, you can try out a number of other options. Like I mentioned, a soil moisture sensor. There's also evapotranspiration or ET controllers. Or you can even get controllers these days that work with your smartphone, and that makes programming really easy. But if you don't have an automatic irrigation system, don't fret. You can still measure the rainfall that you're getting in your yard. And one way to do that is through a rain gauge. So you can get an automatic or you can get a manual rain gauge, but essentially the manual rain gauges, which are pretty cheap and easy to use, are just composed of a tube that collects rainwater from storms. And so you essentially leave it out in an area that's going to get plenty of exposure to rainfall, and then you would just check it after every rain event, see how much you get, record that number, and use that to influence how much irrigation you're going to be giving your turf for that week. So if you do end up getting a smartphone controller, those are usually operating based on local weather data, either predicted by satellites or whatever. So sometimes it's good to have a rain gauge and supplement to that so you can actually see how much rainfall you're getting at your specific site. So moving on, let's discuss some other ways you can set your lawn up for success during the dry season. So my first tip to all of you is to consider getting a rain barrel if you live in a home with a yard. So rain barrels are pretty intuitive. You can assume based on the name that they capture the rainwater that flows off your roof during a storm. So rain barrels usually have a dispenser, a mesh screen to keep out insects, and hold about 50 to 80 gallons of water at a time. And then you can just attach them to your downspout. So they don't cost a lot of money to make, and oftentimes you can actually get them already fully assembled. And so these are a great choice for watering your landscape beds and even your indoor plants because it has all that extra nutrition like nitrogen and oxygen in that rainwater. And so it's great for plants and especially orchids. I don't know if we have any people who love orchids in the chat today, but orchids and rainwater is a good combo. So you can also use that rainwater for washing cars, cleaning tools, and rinsing out recyclables. And you're helping minimize stormwater runoff, which is great for keeping pollutants out of nearby water bodies. So there are plenty of guides online for building your own rain barrel, and you can find them for sale at your local home improvement store or garden store. But lucky for you, if you live in Sarasota County, we actually have free rain barrel workshops with the option of buying a rain barrel along with your tickets. So if you want to get your hands on a discount rain barrel, go ahead and check out our Eventbrite for any upcoming sessions. So I think we currently have them offered once every 2 months. And I know our next one's going to be on February 19th. So I can go ahead and send out a link to register after today's webinar if anyone's interested. But another thing to do this dry season is to make sure your plant beds are mulched. So mulch helps keep moisture in the soil around your plants, and this is great for water retention. But beyond that, it's also really good insulation during the cooler weather. So it's going to keep your sweet little plants warm and toasty when the temperature drops at night. And so there are many different kinds of mulch that you can choose from. And you would go ahead and apply 2 to 3 inches around trees, shrubs, flowers, and vegetables. And a few ideas for mulch include pine bark, pine needles, fallen leaves, treated melaleuca, hardwood, and eucalyptus mulch. So these are all really good options for a Florida-friendly landscape bed. So another tip is to practice good mowing during the dry season. So how you mow your lawn can have a big impact on how much water it needs and the general health of your turf grass. So the general recommendation is you should aim for removing only 1/3 of the blade height. And so that way your grass will be nice and neat, but you're going to be minimizing damage to the plant. So that way it's going to be it's going to have a healthy root system, and it's also going to be more drought tolerant. So the next big tip is to keep your irrigation system maintained and performing its best. And of course, you should do this throughout the year, but because it's so nice outside, it's a great time to be looking at your system and making sure you're repairing leaks, fixing sprinkler heads, going ahead and replacing your filters as you need to, readjusting your spray heads to make sure you're not watering the driveway or sidewalks. And then, of course, pruning plants that might be interfering with your irrigation system. So sometimes those plants can block sprinkler heads or other spray heads and keep them from distributing water to your turf grass. So again, it's a great time to get outside and perform that maintenance, because small problems might seem small now, but over time they can add up to a lot of water loss and an inefficient irrigation system. So with all that said, it's also a great time of the year to upgrade your system. So one way to do that, which I mentioned earlier, is to install a micro irrigation or drip system in those landscape beds and container plants. And so micro irrigation is awesome because it uses a combination of low pressure and low flow to deliver water at a much slower rate than traditional irrigation. So typically micro irrigation systems deliver a maximum of about 30 gallons per hour, and a lot of the time it's much less than that. And that's compared to 180 gallons per hour for the typical sprinkler. So this means a much lower chance of overwatering your plants. And a bonus of micro irrigation is that it's applying that water directly to the plant roots, so you're not going to be wasting it to evaporation or wind drift. So another way you can easily upgrade your system while the weather is nice out is to swap out your traditional spray head sprinklers for MP or match precipitation rotors for a more even and efficient distribution of water. And it's actually a very easy DIY project, and I'm going to be sending a follow-up email today, so I'll go ahead and include a short video tutorial on how to do that. And then the next thing you might want to do to help upgrade your system is cap any spray heads that are wasting water. So again, they may be spraying the sidewalk, the fence, or they're just not doing what they're supposed to do, which is water your plants. So you can go ahead and cap them and save a lot of water that way. Just remember, if you do that, to readjust your watering time, because that water is going to be redistributed to other spray heads in that zone. And finally, I did already mention this, but it bears repeating. If you don't love your rain sensor, go ahead and explore another option that works better for you and your lifestyle. There are plenty of options available, and a lot of them are pretty dang affordable, if I do say so myself. And in fact, they often end up paying for themselves during our annual rainy season. So my final tip is to practice good fertilization if you're going to fertilize this dry season. So I just wanted to share some quick BMPs or best management practices with you when it comes to your fertilizer use. So if you're going to use nitrogen fertilizer, go ahead and make sure that it's at least 50% slow release nitrogen. So that helps extend its efficiency and it helps reduce the risk of nutrient pollution nearby. Make sure that you're not using more than 4 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet of your landscape in a year. And if you irrigate with reclaimed water, you're likely getting a significant amount of nitrogen from that water. So if you're curious to see how much, I can go ahead and link you to our bay-friendly fertilizing tool. And that's going to help you calculate your recommended amount of nitrogen-based fertilizer. So you also want to make sure not to apply fertilizer to any impervious surfaces like concrete or asphalt. And if you do by accident, that's okay. Just be sure to clean up the spillage as soon as you can. When you're mowing your lawn or trimming trees and shrubs, make sure that any of that plant material doesn't travel into your local water bodies. So dispose of those cuttings in the appropriate bins and away from drains, ditches, conveyances, and roadways. And a little tip is that you can actually use grass clippings to help fertilize your lawn. So another option is to get better dirt by adding compost to your soil. And if you're interested in doing that, we have a ton of resources through our office, including live webinars and online classes. I think we actually have some in-person classes coming up as well. So if you live in Sarasota County, we got you on the compost. So if you're using Florida-friendly plants in your landscape, they're not even really going to need fertilizer because they're so used to the climate and soil here in Florida. So with all that said, here are some resources that might be helpful to you as you plan for your dry season projects. And the first is our upcoming micro irrigation class, which is going to be offered in person. And here's the link to register here. I'll also send that in a follow-up email. And there are a number of spots left. And if I get enough people signed up, I may bring in some delicious snacks. So feel free to register. And if you want to participate in one of our upcoming rain barrel workshops, like I mentioned, you can find one and register using this link here up on the screen. And our next one is February 19th. So we offer irrigation evaluations. And if you live in Sarasota County, all you got to do is sign up at this link and I will come to your home. I'm going to go through each of your irrigation zones and let you know how you can improve your system's efficiency. And of course, if you have any questions about your water use or irrigation or your landscape, go ahead and call us at 941-861-9900. So I'm going to send out links to these resources in that follow-up email I keep mentioning and any other helpful documents and videos I mentioned during the presentation. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week and hope to see you at some of our future webinars.